can move development forward very quickly with engagement that's done well. And you can do very good engagement with Indigenous peoples, have the best engagement strategies, and so on and so on and so on. But if the surveyors and the drillers and the people with hard hats on the ground don't understand the issues, you've got problems. And here's a case just in Namibia where a good EIA was done, good consultation, but when the surveyors came in with their 4x4s to start the line cutting, they didn't even ask permission of the local people. Just cut the locks, move in with their trucks. Cattle and goats were wandering all over the landscape, and that whole era of trust that you've been trying to build over the last year or so dissolves. Financial crisis. It's not over. It's still rolling through the world, and we've got 50% of Indigenous population under 25, and they're unemployed. And they're getting angry. You know, they want jobs. They want to be engaged with the modern economy. But how do they do that if they're always kept out of the picture? Today, look at that list of things. Just so many documents and activities underway related to engagement through Indigenous issues or otherwise. It's fantastic, and it's just getting more and more. I want to draw your attention to the second point there. There's a report coming out through the UN on the rights of Indigenous peoples and people contacted through exploration or extractive sectors. And this document is going to lay out the rights of all parties. It's going to be kind of like a tableau or a table of options and how you manage these rights issues when you're in an extractive sector issue. And I also draw your attention to the bottom slide there, the bottom point. If you want to have a look at a good toolkit that's come at least from Canada on how to put all this together, you can draw upon that toolkit. And goalposts are shifting. Toronto Stock Exchange was almost sued for $2 billion because of a court case that almost went through because of a mining company in Ecuador that caused some problems with local people, and a lawyer was hired. They didn't make it to court, but the three plaintiffs were three Ecuadorian women, and the lawyer in Toronto who was holding this case said you shouldn't harm somebody, you should not use your money to hire someone to whom you know likely is to do harm. So this is always the case of companies that hire security firms, private security firms, and that whole process just seems to go quite wrong very quickly. So recently too, in the last couple of weeks, the United Nations Indigenous Peoples Partnership has been formed. So the UN, UNDP, a number of organizations around the world are coming together to support the UN Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And there's also the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, which is held every year. I invite you to go into that website to have a look at the recommendations that are coming out of there. A lot of it is dealing with extractive industries, and that meeting just wrapped up just a few days ago. So lessons learned. I'm almost done here, Pete. Good. Yep. Have a look at the second point there. In Malaysia, a deep water project for gas transmission from offshore to onshore through traditional territories. $36 million in construction costs saved, and starting 3 months early due to a very good consultation engagement process with the local people. As WRI says, a proven track record of harmonious community relations can make future interaction with government regulators much easier and can help a project sponsor with public contracts for other projects. There is this sort of feeling within companies that I've got to get this project started now, done now, but it's a wealthy company that why is there this rush when it might be the only chance for this one community to have economic development? So it's got to be done over time. That relationship has got to be done over time. And so taking your time to do this can be very good for future project development. The conclusions from why I'm looking at this issue around the world is that responsibility-based actions are more sustainable than rights-based actions. And what that means is if companies and governments engage well with Indigenous peoples because it's good to do, not because there's a law that says it's good to do it, you have a better product in the end. And of course, here are just some of the many things that have come from Indigenous knowledge. There's only about 10 there, but there's a whole bunch of things that come from Indigenous peoples. Indigenous people have been providing non-Indigenous peoples gifts of knowledge for hundreds of years. The wealth of North America and the wealth of Europe is because of the knowledge that was given by the Indigenous peoples of North America to the French and the British during the fur trade. that fur trade created the wealth in Europe. And if it hadn't been for the Indigenous people showing the French and the British how to survive in the bush, we would not experience the wealth we know today. So really, in conclusion, respect, humility, and patience is really what we have to look at a bit more from a development perspective. And I hope, looking at that iceberg, you saw that iceberg before, I hope you just, through this very short discussion on Indigenous issues, the aspect of empathy and putting yourself in the shoes of Indigenous people just for a few moments to try to understand where they are coming from when you're sitting across from the table with them, trying to negotiate a deal, understanding the depth of feelings that they might have through this 500 years of contact and the erosion of their knowledge, the erosion of their culture, erosion of their landscape, and yet just with this idea of money being the solution, because it may not be the only solution, as we are experiencing in Canada and British Columbia, where $1.5 billion is on the table, and the more money that's being put on the table, the harder the Indigenous people say no to the project, which is a very interesting conclusion. So thank you very much.
Great, Peter, thank you very much. You can just stay here now because I think there might be a few comments and questions. Great presentation, thanks very much. Would you like to shout or would you like the mic?
I think I'll shout.
You'll shout that.
Yeah. Firstly, I find the whole subject fascinating, and I thought your talk was very interesting. Thanks for that. I've got a couple of comments/questions. I'm not quite sure how to phrase. I'm not sure if there's a solution or an answer, but maybe I can bounce it off you and see what you think about it. Isn't there a fundamental tension between development and Indigenous groups, and are they not incompatible? We are talking about development and the under 25 creation of jobs. We are talking about the HDI and wanting to push that number up. Do those actions not fundamentally change the culture of an Indigenous group, number one? Then the kind of conflict with me is that such a bad thing? Because I find myself thinking of an Indigenous group as this wonderful thing, the same way as I would say a wetland is a wonderful thing. It's a unique, something unique in the world, and it's ring fenced and protected. And somehow it's not sitting quite right in me with trying to decide how to protect the whole community and people who have their own thoughts and ideas about their development. So, yeah, can you respond to that? Is there
Yes, that's at the heart of the question. That's the heart of the issue. Is this tension between development and Indigenous groups? And all I can say is, from my experience with dealing with Indigenous peoples for a number of years, is that it goes back to who we are and where we're coming from, and who they are and where they're coming from. And we see our development agenda as a linear process, start, finish, over a number of years. Indigenous people see it as a circle. And unless we can, again, put ourselves in the mindset of what it means what time means to Indigenous peoples compared to what time means for us, we're not going to have the same conversation. And so, good practice, I'm getting to your point, good practice means that responsible companies will have anthropologists and social experts who know the culture of that community, and will seek out individuals within that community that have some experience with non-Indigenous culture to see where there is common ground. There is tension within communities themselves. I'm not saying it's a Pollyannic kind of process with the Indigenous group that everybody's sunshine and light. No, there's tension within Indigenous groups too about what they want for themselves. I'll give you an example of a project in Canada that's been ongoing for over 40 years, and it's the Mackenzie Valley Pipeline. And if you want to see a classic engagement process that went on for 40 years, it's the Thomas Berger report. And the Indigenous people at that time, 40 years ago, said to the developers, it's all very well and good to have the money that could come to our communities through this pipeline. That's fantastic, because you saw some of the pictures there. But they said to the developers, we're not ready yet. We want to make sure that our children become part of the process, because we are, at that time, 40 years ago, very, not high levels of education, not high levels of literacy. We want to make sure that in 40 years, we've got our sons and daughters go to school, go to university, and then become the contractors, become really engaged with this process. So we've got today about 90% of the Indigenous groups along that Mackenzie Valley Pipeline corridor have agreed to the process, have agreed to the impact benefit agreement, because it's their children who are now negotiating, because they see everything as a circle. The gas has been in the ground for 100 million years. It can wait another 10. It can wait another 20. We can wait another 20. It's got to be right for us on our terms. That's what they said, and that's where we're at today. So again, it's a very important point. It can't be a discussion that can be resolved just in 2 minutes. It takes a little bit longer.
Thank you, Peter.